Welcome, folks. Welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinar series. We're in August already, which is fantastic. Today's session is on video feedback, targeted and personal. Our presenters today are Michael Henderson and Michael Phillips, both from Monash University in Australia. So, the two Michaels, would you like to begin, please?
Yes, thanks, Matt. I might just flip over to that next slide. Okay, so yes, it's the two Michaels. It's the Michael Show tonight, or this morning, wherever you are in the world. You've got our Twitter handles there if you want to tweet to those. And we've got a couple of interesting quotes here that I just want to pause for a moment and give you a chance to have a read. Okay, so what we've got is a range of responses, and you'll be pleased to know that I do actually have some more decoration in my office these days. Here I am, and this is my home office, and it's not quite so dull and dreary behind as it was in those days when I got that notification. But the thing that struck me was not only the students were reporting on this notion of personal, in terms of the comments were personalized, not just individualized, but personalized. And it also seemed that the responses that came back to myself and to my partner in crime, Mike Phillips, they were also all of a personal nature. So comments like, oh, you know, I like to listen to your voice, or, you know, decoration in your office. Those kinds of things seem to come through as well. And it struck us that there's something here. Something is going on. We don't know whether it was the media itself or there are other confounding variables. And so we just started to do some research on this. And we've been doing this now for quite a few years, playing with different variables in our various classes, and now we're reaching out through two funded projects and trying to explore how this plays out in other contexts. Okay, so I might move on a little bit. So first of all, I want to ask a couple of questions. Now, Mike Phillips is on the chat, so he's going to be engaging with you through the chat, and I'm the unlucky person who drew the short straw. You get to listen to me. But we've got three questions here, and really I want to see through the chat dialogue some basic ideas of why we should engage in feedback processes, who's involved in it, and if you like, tell us what you think is successful feedback. Okay, so we've got some great responses coming through, and sure, we can talk about how it can be useful, how it needs to be actionable. There's the notion of feed forward, which really highlights that idea that it should be about where to go next. All of these are really great characteristics. But one of the things that often comes through as I'm scanning through, oh, okay, so James, for instance, has said feedback is successful when students engage with it. And so this is where I want to eventually get to. I want to make 2 points straight up. First of all, that current thinking about feedback really is pushing us to think of it not as an artifact. We often use the term feedback, the word feedback in the way we talk about it, as a thing that we give to students, or, you know, a boss gives to an employee, that kind of thing. And so it's this artifact, the moment. And what we'd say actually is the feedback is a process, and it's coming back to this idea of actioning it, having an impact, has a change. So rather than talking about it as an artifact, let's think about it more as comments or information about performance that is actioned or has an impact, makes a change. And that's really coming back to the sort of probably the truest sense of the notion of feedback in biological and other systems. So what we have then is a bit more of a complex idea. Now, if you want to read more about that, you might want to read, say, David Bowd's work and Elizabeth Malloy's work, and there's many others as well. But there are a couple of people who are helping us in a national project at the moment, which is pretty exciting. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so the other thing about is who is involved in feedback processes. And this is something else to think about, is it not necessarily the teacher and the student. It can be student and student. So we go, oh, yeah, sure, that's peer assessment, peer feedback. Okay, but what about parents? What about friends? What about Facebook community? What about the spell checker as you write in Microsoft Word? What about your computer programming compiler, as Philip Dawson, another colleague of ours in our research project, keeps reminding us. So we have these other ways that we can get performance information or information about our performance that may help us to do something differently. Okay, so now we've got a bit of a more complex idea around feedback, and we can argue this out, of course, except unfortunately I've got the mic, so it's a little bit easier for me to drown you out. But for the point of time, though, let's push on and we can come back through these ideas. So let's talk about what we do. And what you'll find, by the way, is that even in these slides, I've noticed that I occasionally fall back, and Mike and I occasionally fall back into the use of the term feedback as an artifact. So it's so deeply entrenched in the 20 years of my teaching that I'm having a hard time breaking out, even though intellectually I understand this deeper sense. Okay, so the research does tell us, of course, that feedback is important. I think some of the comments I've already seen on the chat window are really picking up on some of these things already. So one thing that we can say is that we really do feel that quality feedback is one of the most powerful single influences on student achievement. Without understanding of your performance, without that evaluation of your performance, how do you know that you need to change, let alone how to change? And so when we think about more broadly, as opposed to simply that comment at the end of an essay, if we think about feedback more broadly, we say it's incredibly important. But our feedback is, we're focusing on assessment. That's where we like to locate ourselves, because we don't think enough people are looking at this, although I know this particular community is really strong. And it's really exciting as I was scrolling through a number of the webinars and conversations going on. So I'm actually really grateful, Matt, for bringing us into this. Just pushing on that a little bit more. So the feedback design does vary. We know this, depending on the agents, the learning contents, the top contexts, the content, the focus, the purposes, product, whether it's summative, formative, continuous, etc., and the mode. So all of these things keep changing what the feedback design looks like, how we do it, when we do it, to what extent, what do we include, what's the structure, are there multiple audiences? Is it to the student as well as the parent, if you're talking, in school stages? Indeed, if what our current research is showing us is that people outside the formal education context of teacher and student are largely involved in feedback processes, then maybe our feedback content, so the comments that we make, maybe we should be aiming for multiple audiences, not just our students. There's a wild and wacky idea. So it's these kind of things that we can play with. Okay, so what we did though is Mike and I, we realized that there wasn't really too many sources out there that gave us this definitive sense of what assessment or comments about assessment, that feedback information really should include. Now, all of these principles are very familiar to you all, I'm certain. Okay, so I don't think we've created anything new here, but we've gone through the literature review and said, okay, well, these ones over here are saying, yes, timing is very important. Okay, great, let's bring this in. So we did this literature review, and we came up with these 8 feedback principles that we feel are quite important. So timely, obviously. And well, I don't really need to. We can talk about it later on. But also the idea of being clear. That's really about ambiguity. So we don't want any ambiguity in the communication. Great effort is ambiguous. Circling something with a pen is ambiguous, because circling something with the letter G next to it for grammar, or even writing grammar, is going to be ambiguous. Because what about the grammar? Presumably the person, if they got it wrong in the first place, aren't necessarily going to be able to interpret the shorthand of grammar to tell them how to get on and do. So we need clarity. We need to be educative, so focusing on how to improve, not just evaluative, which has a place, but the educative has got to be more important. It has to be proportionate. I'm an old English teacher. I'm an old school English teacher. I spent quite a few years editing work. It's part of who I am, and so now, even though I lecture in education technologies, I can't help but edit quite closely in terms of the textual structures, the grammar, those kinds of things. And I've come to realize that me putting so much effort into it and filling up the pages, not only is it not proportionate to key goals, the assessment goals, and therefore pushing the students down a certain kind of way of thinking about academic work in higher education. But it also wasn't leaving me enough time to get on with the more substantive kinds of comments around theory or construction of argument around a particular theme. One of the other principles is that really it needs to locate the student performance. It needs to relate it in relation to the goals of that assessment. We need to clarify what they did well and not so well, and as a result, what they can productively work on in the future. So here we got these notions of feed up, feedback, and feed forward, which are debatable. There are a number of people that would say, well, we shouldn't be talking about these things. If we're talking about feedback as a process, not as an artifact, as about having multiple people involved and no time, then there's maybe an argument not to talk about feed forward because it's already included in that definition. Nevertheless, I think it's quite a good quick little handhold, or handle, I should say, especially for those of us as we're getting our heads into the space. We need to emphasize task performance, okay, and especially metacognition, or self-regulation. So the processes that they went through to produce this work. Now the problem is in higher education is that often we don't get to see draft work. We often don't get to see how our students are constructing the final submission. Being an old school teacher, I did get to see students work, lesson after lesson on various things, showing me drafts, showing me bits of pieces of things. And so I had a real sense of how they got to this final piece. And so I could make comments not only on the quality of this final piece, but I could interpret elements of it about how they got there, and I could sort of give them advice and about how to do things in different ways, or to strengthen this or do more of that. And so we need to find ways within our own education context to try and not only just talk about the artifact of the assessment, but also about how they got there, and that is hard. We need to also try and phrase it as an ongoing dialogue. I think there's a couple points in there. When we want to engage students in a discussion, we want to set them up at least mentally with this notion that they should be reflecting and engaging. If they don't come back and talk to you, that it shouldn't just be a full stop. Okay, it should be at most a comma, while they keep engaging with it. And also, I rather like the idea of an ongoing dialogue, the way we should talk about the comments, because it sort of sets up, within myself at least, and I know with Mike as well, this notion of, hey, we believe that these students are willing and wanting to keep learning in this space, and that they're interested in it. It sets up a very nice, positive, possibly naive, but I think a really positive sense about what we're here for, and that assessment, summative assessment, even terminal assessment, so the very final assessment piece in a unit or a course is not actually the full stop or the end of it. And the last one is sensitive to the individual. And really, I think perhaps I should throw this around and put that one right to the top of the list, to really highlight in Mike and my research how powerful that individual focus can be. And the most recent research that we've been doing really showing that the relationship between the marker or the teacher and the student really has a big impact on how the students receive the comments and feel how they can engage with them. Okay, so those are the 8 principles, and they're all debatable, and you can add more to them, or you could try and collapse some of them. But these 8 we found to be pretty robust in our own work, but as I said, there's always room. So doing all of those things at once, is it an impossible recipe? It sure is pretty difficult to do, but there are ways that we can try and bring in most of them, if not all of them. The 2 most common forms of assessment feedback practices, I think, would probably agree, are written comments on the assignment, or maybe in your learning management system or something, but a written comment, okay, going along with that submission piece. But the problem with that is generally, I think, that it's often limited in the depth and marred by ambiguity. So small comments, these small marks, these brief sentences. I think we can also say. So we've done some analysis of written comments, so we can talk about those. But I think more broadly, we can just sort of say, I think we can say there's going to be a lack of depth. It's marred by ambiguity. It's probably less time, less effort put into the personalisation, really getting to know the people. Because let's face it, it takes a long time to write these things. Now, that's not going to be the case for absolutely every single person, so forgive me, I'm not trying to generalise to everybody, but we can see this flavour coming through the literature and certainly in our own analysis. The face-to-face discussions are another form, and often we have this sense that, hey, if we can give comments about performance, about assessment face-to-face, that's going to be fantastic. It's going to be rich and powerful and meaningful, and sure, it could be those things. But we also know that often it's impractical in large classrooms, or even small classrooms, really, to get these students to one side and have a deep and meaningful with them. But it's also going to be dependent on student memory, and something that we've been finding is that it can be subject to performance anxiety. The teacher can be so much thinking about what they need to say next, and similarly the student might be thinking so much about what they should be saying next to appear to be receptive, or to appear to be reacting the right way. And so things are going to get missed. Digital multimodal feedback, the kinds of things that Mike and I have been doing around video, audio, screen capture, they don't inherently resolve all those problems. They're not the magic bullet, and I think we can all agree that technology is not a magic bullet ever, but it can offer us a number of interesting opportunities. So let's talk about that. So there is some literature, and there's growing literature now, especially over the last a year and a half or so. There's a nice booming field to be looking at audio, screencast, video, multimodal style feedback. And you can see even there I'm starting to talk about feedback as an artifact. So it's so deeply ingrained. So the literature, including our own work, has been showing that it's greater detail. It can be faster, and there's some problems in it, but it can be faster. It can be clearer in meaning. It can be perceived as more individualized, and students are reporting a stronger connection to their teachers. The caveats in the literature, anyway, up until very recently, has usually been framing up as saying, well, this is supplementary policy and practices and expectations, sort of stopping people from using it as the sole form of commentary. And it's also thought to be limited to small classes because, how could you sustain it across hundreds of students? And our own research, which I'll talk about later on, has also been showing up some caveats around additional factors, which will be quite fun to talk about. So where's the on button? Just do a little pragmatic thing here. Where do we start? Look, really simple stuff. You guys, you were all in this webinar, so I think you've already passed the simple technology literacy barrier. So we won't go into the details of this, but there's 3 main forms of commentary that or media that we use to give comments. So it's audio, video, screencast. There's a number of free or open source software and others that you might have to pay money for. We've also been playing with different mixtures, sort of embedding things within PDF, so embedding audio or inking in PDF, plus doing other kinds of things. So we're exploring a whole variety of stuff. We haven't quite gotten to Snapchatting comments yet, 5 seconds or 15 seconds worth of comments in quick rapid fire, but you know, that's something that might be quite fun to do as well. So if you're doing this, please let us know. It'd be fantastic to hook up and find out what you're doing. But here's the more important thing, okay? I think it's quite an important issue in any of these kinds of technology-enabled practices. We need to be able to say it's sustainable and that it's not going to add to our workload. Hopefully it's going to reduce our workload. If it doesn't, then we're going to have a real problem in uptake. So a core part of Mike and my research has been to say, we don't mind investing extra energy into something that eventually has to be able to be demonstrated to be sustainable within workload. And what we've found is with the video, audio, and screencasting, certainly within our workloads, actually made our marking processes faster. So I think it would be quite strange if I said I actually enjoy marking, but I'm not quite so loath to get to it, and I actually find it a bit of a stimulating challenge, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But look, it's quite simple really. Use any old device that you might have. You might have your audio recorder, your phone with an audio recorder on it, or video. I've sat in a cafe with an iPad and recorded comments about students' work. Or at your computer, just like this, as you're looking at me, I might talk out their assignment. The focus, really, it just needs to have the space to show your face. I mean, if you're using camera, that is, you know, to show your face, to show your gestures. The whole point of the face would be to show whether you're sad or angry, happy, you know, to help increase the line of communication. So if you're going to use video, then use it to best effect. And the length, we try and keep to around about 5 minutes. If we go too much more than that, the file size gets pretty big. What we found, though, more recently, as we've been doing high-quality screencasting and exploring different options, we can have files up to 100 megabytes now, or even over that, and students haven't complained at all. I mean, we might have a rather unique selection because we are in the area of education technology, but we're also talking with undergraduate students, or first-year students, I should say, not in the EdTech space. But nevertheless, if it's about 5 minutes, and depending on the software that you use, it's going to be manageable size of 15 meg or 20 meg these days, or much larger if you're high quality. Within 5 minutes, you can get a lot of content in there. I think that we did an analysis that within 5 minutes of talking, we can see around about 500-600 words, and in comparison with the same markers in terms of what they write on previous assignments, it was only about 100-150 words at most. So you can see that in the 5 minutes of recording, it can have a lot more content. Okay, but now, what's the other details? Okay, so the process now was that the video is generally recorded immediately after the assignment. This means that the proximity is closer, you don't have to take notes. Because again, if you're making copious notes, then it's not going to be a sustainable process. So you need to think about that. At most, what we would do is make a few notations on a paper in our own shorthand, just to remind ourselves what we want to talk about, because we might see some themes coming through. So if it was a Microsoft Word document, I just highlighted a couple of different colors as I was reading through, just to remind myself to come back and talk about that. The videos are never or rarely re-recorded and never edited, because if you're editing, doing post-production, then you're slowing everything down and you throw it out, okay? The only times that we re-record, and that's rare, is when we really stuff up. Okay, like something comes into the room, or we get interrupted, or something like that, and so it's really rare. I think in the last 6 months I've only re-recorded once. Okay, ums and ers are okay. You're not trying to produce Steven Spielberg's work or BBC News. In fact, if you don't use ums and ers, you are probably actually reducing the ability of both parties to communicate very clearly. Ums and ers on your part are great spaces for your brain to catch up and figure out how next to clearly articulate your point. And ums and ers being received by the student can be really great thinking moments for students to process what's going on. Okay, so don't cut out the ums and ers. Don't even try. Also, it's okay to look a bit rough, look a little bit shaggy, looking a little bit, you know, sort of dressed up and fancy looking. Okay, it's okay to appear that way and to talk off the cuff. What we found in our research is that it hasn't affected the results at all, and students seem to feel that it's highly authentic. It's a instant personal reaction to their work, and even when I recorded in a cafe or in strange locations, then students respond really, really well. So don't worry about those kinds of things. Okay, and then we upload to the elite along with the grade. We do not include grade because we are separating grade from comments about performance, about how to strengthen. I'll talk in a moment about what we include. Okay, so I can see a few comments about different software that can be used, such as VoiceThread and other software. So sure, there are a number out there, and I think we're starting to see far more effective virtual learning environment modules as well, where we can annotate, edit, and add audio commentary directly into documents. So I think watch this space about what we can get up to. Okay, so look, here's the real thing. This is the thing that Mike and I have been working on for quite a while. We think we've got it right for ourselves, and now we're testing it out with colleagues in our own faculty and other faculties, other disciplines, and we're trying to see, is this the kind of structure, what should go into those comments? Certainly worked for us in our work. I'll talk about the results. So the structural elements are, first of all, the salutation, then relational, goal, etc. I'll talk through each of those very, very briefly. The salutation is incredibly important. Hi, John. It's as short as that, but it's very important. What we've found in other contexts, in discussion forum contexts, and YouTube video interactions, is when you cut out the hi, John, then it actually can be received by others as an angry, terse, short, unfriendly kind of communication. So do the effort of checking the name of the student and saying, hi, John. And you can say a little bit longer as well if you like. The relational work really is just saying, hey, let's expand on that salutation a tiny bit. We know through the literature that relational element is very important. It helps the students to get into a receptive mode. It gets them to realize that you are working with them, that you have an understanding of them, and that these comments are going to therefore hopefully be a little bit more relevant. Okay, so it'd be along the lines of, hi, John. Hey, thanks for submitting this assignment. I know we've had a few communications and you've been struggling along the way. As simple as that. Or it could be something about their forum participation or anything that you know about them, just to show that you recognize them. And of course, sometimes in really large classes, it can be in some large classes, it can be really hard to know much about students. So, depending on how you approach this, you might want to just do a quick check through your discussion forum logs or other kinds of elements. One of the things that Mike and I do is we try to, in our own teaching, follow the same student if we're marking assignment 1 and assignment 2. And so sometimes we'll do a quick little relational work thing there where we're referring back to the first assignment. Okay, now the third item, the goal of recording, this is the most essential. This is the thing you don't ever want to forget. The goal of recording is educating your students about the purpose of the recording of these comments. It is also reminding you as the speaker about what you can and can't say, about what you should be focusing on. It's a really important thing. Now, there's a few different set phrases that you can use, and if you read some of our papers, there's a link at the top right of this slide and at the end of this presentation. But the goal of recording goes something along the lines of, hey, in these 5 minutes, I can't talk about everything in your assignment, but what I want to do is take this moment to pick on 3 things that I think you could really strengthen to develop your work as you move forward in, your career or your degree or this unit or whatever. Okay, the key thing there is to say, I'm not going to talk about everything, and I'm going to really focus on strengthening on the things that I think you could really strengthen on. And whether you choose 3 or 4 or a couple or don't even number them, that doesn't really matter. So you're not trying to prove the grade. Grade doesn't even get mentioned here. You're not trying to prove the grade. You're not trying to prove whether they went right or wrong. You're just going to focus on the things that they could really usefully know. So that then sets you up to say, oh, right, I don't have to prove this thing right or wrong, okay? Now, we know that there's a bit of a disconnect here. There's often, it can feel by lecturers that they need to demonstrate why this is this grade. We also know that some students have a sense that when they look at the comments, that it should be telling them why they didn't get the grade that they were after. But that's not mandated. That's not a thing that you have to pursue. And in fact, I think we have the space here to educate our students. And in the 7 or 8 years that Mike and I have been doing this with all of our students, hundreds and hundreds of students, not once have we had a problem in this regard, and it's been really well received. We have had a couple of students coming back and saying we want more details, but that's fine, because the very last thing, as you can see on this slide, is the valediction invitation. That's to come back and talk to us if you want to. So after the goal recording, we do a quick evaluative summary, like 1 sentence, say, hey, overall this is a really strong assignment. So we find that really helped alleviate the anxiety. Then, because I'm an old English teacher, I can't help myself. I know Mike does the same, but he might mix it a tiny bit here. Talk about some of the textual issues, the structure, the grammar, the APA, formatting, those kind of things. And then I spend most of the time, that big part of what we call the wine glass image here. The big bit is commenting on the substance. This is where, when I've read through the assignment, I will sit back, close my eyes for a moment, and I'll think, what could I really offer to the student about what they should read now, or go on and pursue, or practice, or do, or demonstrate. And so that's when I talk about it here. And I say, hey, you should go off and read this person. Your mind is going to be blown by this, because you're talking about this over here, and I think going over to this person, and so that's the bit that I find intellectually stimulating, and it makes you feel more of a teacher again, rather than someone trying to prove or disprove a mark. Right. I can see time's flying, so I'm just going to push through. So just to give you a sense of this, Mike, I think if you can put the URL in there, there's the first video on this page. So there's a URL in the chat window. The very first video on that page will give you some content or some examples of Mike and I talking through these different stages: salutation, relation work, etc. So I'm going to go quiet for, I think, 3 minutes and let you play that video, and you can just see how rough it all is.
Hi John, thank you for your assignment.
Emma and Sammy, it's Mike here.
Hi Simone, thank you for your assignment. I've just read it.
Hi Francis, it's Mike here.
Hi Rob, thank you for your assignment.
I just want to congratulate you on getting through to the end of what is a bigger than Ben-Hur unit.
It's really great to see how you're building on some of the work that you did
Hi
in your
everyone.
assignment.
So what you need to do is go to the link
particularly around,
that
say,
Mike Phillips
G's work,
provided,
video games, gamification, those kinds
and
of things.
once you're
But
there,
it's also really nice
on
to
the
see how
left-hand
you're
side,
broadening
you've got
your
various pages
ideas
under
around how
workshop
to implement
materials.
technologies in your
So the very
classroom.
last
I want to
link down on the
congratulate you both
left-hand
on your
side is the
efforts,
workshop
not only on
materials,
this assignment, but
and
throughout
what
this
you'll find
semester.
are
This is a
handouts and
massive
videos.
unit.
And the
You've
very
done an
first
awesome
video
job.
Thank you for
is
all
the
your
one
work
that you
through
want
the
to use.
semester, and
Video
it's really good to
provided
see that all those emails backwards and forwards leading up to this assignment have clearly helped you sort of figure out the focus of your work. So this video is your feedback. So what I want to do is focus on those things that struck me that I think you can strengthen for your future assignments and for your future work in this area of instructional design.
This video is really designed to give you some feedback on that writing. I don't have the capacity to go into huge amounts of detail on every single aspect of your work, so if there's something that I don't talk about or something that you'd like to talk about in greater detail, please don't hesitate to make a time for us to catch up and we can have a chat about that.
What I do want to spend the time on is focusing on things that I think could strengthen your work as you look forward to your next assignment.
Overall, I think your writing is really strong and presents a really clear narrative.
Overall, as I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this work, and it was really pleasing to see how you built on your assignment one.
You're referencing there isn't APA compliant. They all need to be together in the one set of brackets.
Something that I think you really need to get on top of is the way in which you're using quotations and citations to support your work.
I would have liked to potentially have seen maybe a little bit less, maybe around the serious game kind of stuff up here.
Okay,
You might
so
like to start to think about, what does this mean
or most of you wouldn't have
on a
finished
broader
that video by
context?
now.
When you engage
But
with
you're getting a
game-based
sense of the
response
different
system
components, different structures,
material, I think
and
you
the
really
way in
needed
which
to go into more detail there.
even Mike and
So
I do
that
things
it's not just
differently,
about
even
individual
though
teachers in
we've
individual
been working
classrooms,
together
we
for
start
many, many
considering
years.
things.
And what we're finding is we're exploring with different lecturers, different markers, that everyone has their own flavour. And that's something that we're trying to come to grips with. What does that mean for the overall success or not success of this process? So moving on now, hopefully so that video and the other resources are going to stay on that site, so you can just keep using that. And we're going to be putting a lot more resources on there over time. So please do come back. Okay, so just quickly now, the time is flying. I just want to talk about some results from our work. We've been also doing this in high school settings as well, and that's been reaffirming these findings, but in a slightly different way. Nevertheless, these are from higher education. So potential strengths, we have noticed that there's a real strong theme of students reporting that it's been individualized and personal. So individualized, so it's specific, and personal, so it has that personal quality. Really, it's been interesting to note that it's been around this idea of valorizing the identity and effort. So it's really highlighting that the students are feeling supported. They're perceiving their educator or their marketer as caring. Now the funny thing is, I don't think I'm actually any more caring when I do a video than when I write comments. However, this is what's coming through. So there's something about the warmth of the voice, the nature, the rich media of the video or the audio. There's again the same results with audio. There's slightly different sort of strength in different places. That it's supportive, that they think that we care more about them. So it's a pretty powerful effect. We've also got the idea that it's clear, detailed, and unambiguous. Detailed, I think, can be explained by just the sheer volume of what you can say in a 5-minute video or audio. But there's also the sense of being unambiguous. Now, also about prompting reflection, and I think that really comes not so much from the media, but from that structure. We're saying spend the majority of your time talking about the substantive issues and what they could then go on and usefully do. And that comes through in the responses here. And similar with constructive, that's useful, something that they can do. There are some potential weaknesses. We are seeing a ongoing trend in the results of our students, even most recently, of an initial anxiety about opening up the video file and seeing the assessor's face. There's a sense, oh my heavens, I'm going to get told off by my teacher, which is quite funny even when this is coming through in graduate level. But they have this initial anxiety, and then what we're finding is the students reporting that actually they get over that really quickly. And I think, again, that's to do with the salutation, that relational work, and really gives that sense. Now, I have to say that, through the process, you think it must be really hard to give bad news to students about how they failed an assignment or did very, very poorly. And while it's an interesting experience, it's actually a really generative one, because you can really express your sense of disappointment or empathy, I should say, not disappointment with them, but the empathizing with the student about how disappointing this might be and where things could have been otherwise. And you can talk about all the ways that they could have strengthened in their work. And we've actually had students who failed actually come back and apologize. And I've never had that before, where I've marked up an assignment and given it a 45% or something. And but I've had students come back and say, oh, I'm terribly sorry about this. And Mike, I think, has even had people send him videos back. The other potential weakness is matching the feedback to assignments. Again, that exact alignment between the bit that you're talking about and where it was in the assignment. So it is a bit clunky to be able to say through the audio or the video, or on page 3 you said this, and then the student has to scramble and look through it. Now, Mike has been having some great results through screencasting and being able to actually show on the screen as he's talking about it, and so the students have responded really well to that. One of the things, though, is if you are a person like me who gets really bogged down in the grammar and the structure and those kind of things, I sometimes find that on screencasting, I can't help but really get into the text, and so it can slow you down. So you just need to keep an eye on what media and the purpose, are these things aligned with what you're trying to do. Now, what I've got is a series of slides where I've just simply got quotes backing up these kinds of things, but because time's flying, we don't need to look at those quotes. One of the other things that we need to report on is the lecturer perceptions. Now, there is a real sense that there's a risk of not covering everything that's important. Okay, fair enough. We haven't found that. We found that actually it's much more valuable to talk about some things in detail. One of the other risks that we haven't found, but certainly we've been talking to other lecturers who are engaging in this process with us at Monash University, is the sense that their students might be litigious, and what would happen, if they are reporting. If the students come back and say, "Oh, you said this in the video." Now, we've never found that. So Mike and I have never had students come back saying, quoting us back to ourselves and saying there's something wrong. And I think really that's a larger concern than it needs to be. I think perhaps as educators, as academics, we might be quite good at self-editing our text, our writing, but we're not quite so familiar or comfortable with self-editing what we say, into a recording and then giving it to the possession of a student. And I think once you realize that and work through it, I think there's a problem. Certainly we haven't seen any problems whatsoever yet in the 8-odd years that we've been doing this. And we've done to a lot of students, and we've worked with other lecturers quite a bit too. So some of the other advantages that we've really found that it's efficient. For us, it is quick to produce. It's quicker than the writing. And when you think about it, it makes sense. If you're going to be editing up or marking up an essay, for instance, you might be circling this, circling that, making a few notes in the margins, and if you realise that actually circling something and putting the word grammar next to it is not really a very good way to go, and it has actually 3 or 4 words to give a whole sentence, so all that slows it down. And then, of course, you've got to think about what you're going to write. Write squished in at the bottom of an essay, or indeed, on your virtual learning environment, and you write out some things. And so it takes a while to edit that text, to put it up there, And what we found actually that it's quite easy to sit back and go, right, I'm just going to read this to get a real sense of it. And as I'm reading it, I'm just ticking off in my head, oh, there's this issue. And, you know, at the end of reading it, so you just quickly race through it. You don't have to stop and circle and write and all those kind of things. You stop from at the very end of it, have a little bit of a think about what you're going to say, and you get into it. You hit the record, do your 5 minutes, hit stop, upload the file, done. And of course, a lot of systems now allow bulk uploads, which make it even faster. So for us, it definitely is more efficient. It is also enjoyable. It's stimulating to figure out what could I say that will blow their mind, that will give them the next thing that they could latch on to, or you know, whether it's theory or skill or process, or a page to read, or just giving them some advice about what they could maybe practice and do. It is a little bit more challenging, which makes it fun. And it does feel like a conversation. Often I'll be talking away, and I'll find that I'm just nattering on, and I'm starting to go over those 5 minutes. And so I'm having to teach myself to get back to the 5 minutes, because I'm enjoying having a chat with them, even though it's one-sided. But the students' responses have also said that they feel that it is a conversation. So it's quite strange to have it in this very one-way media, but to be reported as a conversation. We feel that it does enhance the pedagogical relationships, that sense of understanding who your students are and how to lead them to learning, or to enhance their learning. And there is that greater potential to include the feed forward, that stuff about what you could do next. So we've found that from the lectural side of things, it can be very rewarding. Of course, there would be other stories in that as well. So we know some people, people who are sitting in shared office spaces who don't have a quiet or private place to do the recordings, find it really hard to find that time and to be able to do it. So there are other kinds of constraints. Now, there is no silicon bullet. I mean, I think we can all agree that technology is not going to fix the world, but it's certainly going to make it interesting and keep us in a job. But the modality itself is unlikely to be the only factor. I think we can very confidently say that the modality, that the ability to say a lot in a rich, warm, communicative way, can really break a number of those barriers around ambiguity, etc. So you can draw on media richness theory, saying that the richer the media, the less the ambiguity and confusion. And when we're talking about assessment, let's face it, that's pretty high-stakes stuff. So we have this moment where the students are attuned and they're listening and they're ready. Now, what can we actually say? There are a lot of other variables that we're now starting to play with. Obviously, the feedback structure itself, works well for us, has worked well for some others, but everyone has their own tweaks. So what really is at the core of all of that? What other media, what other kinds of things? Maybe Snapchat is the best thing to do. Let's play, let's find out. Also the lecturer marker characteristics and the student characteristics. We're digging a little bit more down into this. Our most recent research is really revealing quite a variation amongst marking staff, so amongst tutors, and we're trying to figure out, well, why is this the case? So the media, the use of the video, audio, or screencast seems to float their sort of make this. I need to rephrase this. The students reporting on their perceptions of those comments that have been done in multimodal formats seem to float higher up on the scale of responses. Even when you're doing text, you can still get students respond really, really well to it, in terms of saying this is great. So what we find is it's not the media itself that simply does the job. There are other things at play, but the media does seem to have an influence. So I suppose that's a really good message to finish off with, that I think we've got some principles, those 8 principles that help to guide us. We've got the structure, which gives us a sense of, well, how do we implement these principles? We've got the understanding of the media and the different kinds of affordances of those media that helps us to achieve our goals. But we know that we can't sort of rest on our laurels, that there is a much more complicated story out there, and we're starting to dig away at it. So watch this space. We are currently involved in a OLT research project with Deakin, and we're also doing an internal project at Monash, and hopefully we're going to be revealing some more of those results as we go. Certainly, we'll be presenting a paper at Ascolite, so if you are turning up to the Ascolite conference, please come along and say hello, and if you're doing anything interesting or doing some things along these lines, we would love to know what you're doing, and maybe even we could share some data with you and start to put together this jigsaw puzzle. I'll leave it there. We're coming right to the end now. Sorry we didn't have a really long question and answer. Hopefully Mike has been answering some of those questions, but we've got a few minutes now, and you can always reach out to either Mike or by phone or email or even Twitter.
All right, thanks. I've just stuck up your final slide there so people can have a look at your links and your Twitter again, etc. I assume that bit.ly.lnmrg is the Learning with New Media homepage, so there's lots of useful information if you might want to have a look on there as well. And of course the bit.ly assessment feedback, which is the project-specific link. Now, we will of course be putting this recording on our website, and all the wonderful links and references and things that people have been posting in, I shall stick them on the recording page as well. So we'll just stick around for a little while if people want to ask more questions, you're welcome to do so. So during this last minute or two, if people want to ask a question via the microphone, please stick up your virtual hand using the little hands up symbol, and you can have a talk. Melanie, would you like to speak? You just press the talk button in the upper left-hand corner.
Hello, I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes, all good.
Thank you. So I'm Melanie from the University of Tasmania, and I just had a quick question. I may have missed it in the chat feed, but it's around the process of moderation. And I understand that the moderation will be around the mark, but do you actually moderate any of your feedback that you provide to students?
That's a great question. Often moderation is about the mark or the grade, and I think that probably needs to continue. What we have found, though, is working with teams of markers in a subject, there's a degree of maybe not so much moderation, but training. What we found is simply providing the 8 principles, the structure, showing them where to click buttons and saying go to it, and even showing examples of what we do is not necessarily enough. I think, well, we've talked to people at other universities who have been starting to engage in the idea of getting their markers to each produce at least one of these comment artifacts, whether it's audio or video, and then providing that to, in effect, a moderation-styled meeting. So it's not so much moderating in terms of the grade, but it's sort of coming to an understanding of how best to express yourself, how to get some of the strengths out in what you're talking, those kinds of things. So definitely, I don't think it's something that we can just set and forget and expect people to achieve. And some people seem to have need a little bit more support. I think there might be also a dimension there of if you have unexperienced or people with less experience, people who maybe feel they have less strong domain knowledge. Of course, it makes it harder then for them to make those broader connections and say where you should read next or what you should go on to. For those who aren't in charge of a space and so they don't know where the unit is going or haven't lived through that second assignment yet, it becomes really hard for them to make comments or direct those students. So it's sort of more about locating and building up the confidence of your marking staff, whether they're tutors or not, along with that training. It's a really good question, actually. I should put a slide on it. It's incredibly important.
Yeah, please go ahead.
My question is whether it's possible to use any clips from this session or other transforming assessment webinars for staff development workshops. There's some great stuff in there. It would be brilliant to be able to take clips from it and use it.
As far as I'm concerned, you can use whatever you like. It's all in the public domain because it ends up on YouTube, etc. anyway.
Absolutely. In terms of this, please do use it. What you might find is if you're looking for clips, on that resource page that we sent you off to, there are some high quality videos of Mike and I having a chat and sort of demonstrating. And if you come back in about a month, maybe less, we'll also have a series of videos and resources there of how to create you know, screencasting, video, audio, what's the kind of things that you should be looking for. Not so much about which button to press, but the characteristics of each of those things. We actually demonstrate how we create it. So it's not live yet. We've got all the resources done. We just need to produce it now in a website format. But please do come back.
Melanie, did you want to ask another question? Your hand's still up, if not.
No, I'm sorry. I just haven't taken
okay.
that down.
No worries. Anybody else? Last minute questions before we stop the recording? No? Okay. So I'll say thank you to Michael and Michael, the two Michaels as we say. Great session, very informative, and you can see there's a lot of active discussion there, and hopefully people will be able to follow up with you further, and of course our recording page as well. So just a formal thank you, and we'll stop the recording.